Hey guys, welcome back to another video, and today I'm super excited to be talking about the release of Make AI agents. So it's been out for about 2 weeks now, and I've had my go at fiddling around with it and seeing whether it's actually worthwhile or if it's a little bit of hype. So let's jump in and have a look what the AI agent can do, and then later we're going to look at adding something to an existing AI agent so you can get a feel and understanding of like how you would actually use this yourself. So over here I'm in Telegram. I've got it obviously connected to Andrew's assistant agent. So I could do something like what is the time now? Okay, what is the date tomorrow? Then I could go and do something like, what is on my calendar for Tuesday? So here's my calendar events that have come back and links to them. And I've also got something I could say, what is the weather like in Cape Town tomorrow? Connected it to a weather service so it knows how to check weather. And obviously I could also change the location. What is the weather like in London tomorrow? So as you can see, you've got a bunch of things. Look, these are very novel examples, and I will jump in and show you a little bit more about how it's working on the back end. So here's Andrew's AI assistant. And how you set it up is you obviously have a system prompt. You can connect it to whichever AI you want to use. In this case, I'm pretty sure I connected this one to Claude or OpenAI, whichever you've got the API connection for, and whichever you want to really use. They all pretty much fine. Well, I mean, to be fair, Gemini 2.5 is incredible. If you haven't tried it, go check it out. So you've got a system prompt, you've got some agent settings. Obviously, okay, so I'm connected to GPT-4 here. You've got some max tokens, things you can specify whether to obviously reduce that if you want to just a little bit worried about the AI using up all your credits. I don't have much topped up on my OpenAI account at any one time, so I don't really care if it uses all of it. And yeah, so you can play around with the settings. I've left them as default, besides I let it have a little bit more history context. So it obviously remembers, it locks it into a thread. So you can say, my name is Andrew, and then like 2 conversations later, you can be like, what's my name? And it'll remember that. So how you have a main system prompt. And as you can see, like things with like time zones were a little bit tricky. I did have to specify some of these fields in open brackets, and those are going to be like your fields that we're going to use. So how the whole system works is it's got input variables and output variables. So it's got to know what to send to scenarios, and it's got to know what to take out of scenarios. So if we look at the weather scenario, for example, I've got 2. So weather span for a city and weather for any city. So I could also say, what's the weather like next week, Tuesday in London? And it'll be able to determine the city, and it's obviously got to figure out what the date parameters are for next week. So this is what it looks like. Very straightforward and simple. But the main thing that you might not be used to is having to set up these scenario inputs and scenario outputs. So for the scenario input, obviously I need to give it which city is going to be called. And that's going to, once you create the input, you'll be able to put it over here. And then that knows, well, the AI is going to create that input, send it to this module based on the parameters I've specified. Then the rest of it is just, this is just aggregating it. So it's all, instead of set bundles, I just want it in one big array. And then I send that whole array back to the AI agent. So in this case, I've got an output module called weather of city for time period. And I've just given it a bit of a description. Obviously, it's an array. And that's going to send the information back to the main agent. So once it comes back, it obviously processes it again. So because when it's coming back from the weather agent, it's just like a messy looking array. And it needs to, I might have asked what's the weather like on these specific days. So it's got the whole array, the whole time frame. And then it's just going to pick out specific parts of that to obviously respond to me then. So that's kind of the gist of how it works. You do have to tell it which tools it has access to. So I can go add, and I would have access to all of my scenarios within Make, and I can, obviously, I've limited it to these. And you do also have to give a specific description per scenario that it understands how and which scenario to let it run on, or which to use. If you're asking for weather, it needs to know a little bit about the input variable, the city variable, like the date ranges. If you just want the time, like let it know like what time zones are coming back in, what formats are coming in, what format do you need to specify any inputs on that. In this case, there isn't, but all of that detail helps the AI to understand more. This is probably quite a simple explanation. I've seen a lot of guys go into a lot of detail on the system prompt, but it just goes to show whether you have a load of detail or not a lot of detail, you can, it generally still gives a pretty good result. So then next thing is to have a look at the main, how you actually interact with the AI agent. So that's over here. As you can see, I've been quite busy on it. All of this is quite unnecessary, except for, I mean, technically it would what I just showed you functions just on this. So I've got the Telegram bot, watch for updates. Always make sure it's just coming from your chat ID, so that, because obviously the Telegram bots are public. And then you can run an agent. You can specify here as well if you want them to have, obviously it's got all the system tools, but you can have specific agents that have access to specific tools. So even though it's part of the main agent, if I'm running it in this scenario, let's say it's a message coming from Telegram, then it might have access to specific tools only. If it was a message coming from Slack, it might have an access to like different tools and arrays. Here's where you can have a thread ID if you want to keep the conversation. Maybe you have multiple people using the agent. Additional system instructions, that's also if you want to specify anything extra. But the main thing is what you want to do is if you've got the message, that's going to go there. And then whether you want to continue running while the agent is working, that's if it's going to take something that needs a long time to generate. So an agent could, in theory, and I've seen this in some tutorials, you could have it go from set the, find the date, scrape the web for 150 pages on any events in a specific town, add all of those events to a Google Sheet, then create a summary, create a voice note, turn it into a LinkedIn post. Like all of that could be in one thing. So if you want this to still come back and in the meantime say, okay, send you a message back to Telegram, say it's processing, you would just let it carry on or not carry on, whether you want that to do. So yeah, that's the thing with agents. It can take a very long time depending on the complexity of how you've set it up. So in this case, this is just for if I want to do a voice note to the bot, then it's going to convert it into text, and then it will get that variable here, and then it will, it just converts it and then does the exact same thing, responds to me. So let's add something interesting to the module. Obviously, I specialize in finance automations. So I thought, why not do something with invoices, and we can then use it to say like, hey, how were my sales yesterday? What invoices were there? And you could theoretically go on to expand this, like, which invoices aren't paid from yesterday or from any date. And, you can almost have like an interactive bot with like Xero, QuickBooks, whatever you're using. So let's set this up. What we can do is, technically, I don't need any of those. And I'll get rid of these as well. Basically, it's a new thing. So first thing we want to do is search for invoices, select your company that you want to use, and then what I want to do is I need an input. I need to know what the start date, what date to search from, just to give it a little bit of, you could also do the contact name, things like that. But in this case, I'm just going to give it any invoices after a certain date. So the input variable needs to be, I'm going to call it INV from date. And this is the date from which to search for invoices. Save that and modified after, and then put in your invoice from date. Then we're going to do an array aggregator. So let's run this module only. Okay, so it's working. And now obviously I can check my array aggregator. I didn't need to put a start date in there. It's just brought back the first 100 invoices, but in future it will automatically do that. Okay, so I want invoice number, reference. If you wanted to do who owes me money, something like that, you can do that there. I'm just going to do date, the total, and there's one more I'm looking for, is the currency code. Otherwise, it's going to assume I work in dollars. Then this is going to create it into an array. Then you need to find this thing called it's just like a module. Then scenarios, return output. And from here, you obviously want the output scenario. And then I'm going to call it invoice array. This is the array of invoices. Make sure it's selected as array, and then click save. And then what is this going to be? It's going to be the aggregation of the invoices, so it knows exactly what's happening. Let's just check it works. Luckily, it doesn't need a date to work something in. And yes, I can see some invoices. It's obviously just coming back from, there's no date at the moment. So then I'm going to save this. You do have to set it to on and make it run on demand. That's going to be essential. Then what I want to do here is go to add it on, get invoices. And there is still a description from when I had it added earlier. Use search date. Well, this is the variable I gave it last time. So let me just change this to invoice from date. Input as the date to which subsequent blah, blah, blah. This works. Then what else I have to do is just get the command, so you don't have to watch me type. And this is what I'm going to put in. Sorry, this is what I want to put in over here. Go to the bottom. If you need to search for invoices, use the get invoices scenario and send date after which to search from. I just want to change this from search date to invoice from date. And it's universal time. and that should be good. So then obviously I want to save that, and we've got everything. Then let's head back and see if it works. So I could say to the bot now, how were my sales yesterday? And there it's pulled through. It's even totaled it up. And you could also say something like, what was my biggest invoice yesterday? Let's see if it can determine that. And it's pulled it through. So pretty powerful. You could obviously go further, and what I would do is have something like search for contacts. So in theory, you could have an AI agent phone bot that's connected to this, and it can ask you, what's your customer name, are there any outstanding invoices, or as an internal tool, instead of going into the system, you just have a chat interface, and they on the phone, and the customer's saying, oh, how much do I owe? Just put it into the chat. How much does this customer owe? Boom, pops it back. You will still have the links to that exact contact file, so you can always verify it and check it, and you can build in those limits and safeguards around it. But essentially, you could create a very powerful tool for doing all of that. And the AI will know to first search for the contact ID. Then it will use the contact ID as an input. Or if it doesn't have the contact ID, what parameters did you give it? Oh, date. Then it knows it doesn't need to search for the contacts first. It'll just get all the invoices after a certain date. And you can do that with a number of variables. So very, very powerful. Very, very interesting design and build. What do I think of it as my overall opinion? I think it's very good. I was lucky enough to get invited to Makes HQ last week for a hackathon, and we got to sit with the developers and see the back end and see what's being developed. They do have some cool stuff coming, and what I would personally like to see, and not saying whether or not they are working on these, but obviously if you had some RAG information, that would be awesome. RAG just means you could pre-populate it with your company documents, PDFs, voice notes, files, everything like that. So the AI has a bit of a context on your business, opening hours, everything like that. So that's you would upload all of that information, save it. That would be very, very powerful. And then the other thing would be to build in system tools like calculator, time, date. Like I don't feel like I need to have a scenario for all of those things. Those are very basic and probably should just be included, and also shouldn't charge me operations for. And then maybe obviously the visual feel and look of how the agents run. Like when the agent runs, it's just the normal make spinny thing. It doesn't show me which sub modules are running. Obviously, in the reply, in the output data that you get from the module, it does tell you what ran and what didn't run, and like what process it took. So the data, the metadata is there, but there's no like visual thing. And N8N does as well, where you can actually run it and you see, okay, it's boom, boom, you can like follow the whole thing, and then it comes back to the agent, and then that outputs it. That I think is very cool. It's obviously tricky to do that, and it's a new feature, so they don't want to roll out all these like new visual things and like make sure it's janky. But yeah, it works well. I think there's going to be some massively important and valuable automations coming out of this. It's not a gimmick. There's a lot of gimmicky automations out there, like the calendar searching. Maybe has some value, but overall is probably not something like a specific agent is needed for. You could have done that with just like a chat module, but add that in with the context of knowing the days, the times, add in some people, add in some more layers into it, And it probably is going to become more complicated, where you're going to need that agent to direct, hey, let's get this, get that, get that, get that, get that, and then like bring it all back and then output a result. That's what I'm looking forward to. I'm excited to see how this develops, and I'm very excited to be on this journey with you guys. Thanks for watching all the way to the end of the video. Till next time, peace.